Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 Skylanders that take skill versus the top 5 Skylanders that take no skill to use. So this means that a Skylander that takes skill means you have to use a combination of all their attacks and you have to understand their moveset to use them properly in battle. But a Skylander that takes no skill means you can just spam their primary and just destroy hordes of enemies. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Starting with the top 5 least skillful Skylanders. Now starting off with my number 5 pick, it's going to be Chopper. Now Chopper is on this list only because he has an auto-aiming attack, which I feel automatically makes him a less skillful Skylanders than other Skylanders where you have to actually aim their attack. And also because his tertiary attack is pretty useless, so most of the time you're just going to be relying on the auto-aiming missiles. And then also he has that charging attack, which is pretty easy to use. So he just uses it to get out of situation, but then you could just keep spamming with the rockets. So that's why I think he's not very skillful to use. But he's definitely a bit more skillful than the other Skylanders that are going to be on this list. Now my number 4 pick is going to be Bumble Blast. So I actually really like Bumble Blast, but he again has an auto-aiming attack, and his primary attack is pretty overpowered. His bees do a lot of damage, and they actually have better auto-aiming than Chopper, but the only reason he's higher on the list than some of these other Skylanders is because his secondary and tertiary attacks actually are pretty useful, but most of the time you are just going to be relying on those auto-aiming bees. For my number 3 pick, it's going to be Magna, who is a Skylander I also think is pretty overrated because I don't really see myself using his secondary or tertiary attacks very often. If you're using his bottom half, I find his bottom half and also his third attack to be pretty useless, and I end up just spamming with his laser attack. And you don't even have to go through the effort of spamming the primary, you can just hold it down and laser enemies, so I feel like again that's a pretty low skill Skylander. Now for my number 2 pick, a Skylander everyone was expecting probably to see in number 1, but he's actually going to be the number 2 spot. That's going to be Drobot. Now Drobot is the poster child for low skill Skylanders. This is the Skylander you think of when you think of low skill, because his secondary and tertiary attacks are completely useless, and you could just hold down, again like Magna Charge, you could just hold down the primary, but it doesn't even have to recharge. You could just hold it down infinitely, and again you don't even have to go through the effort of spamming. You just hold it down and laser enemies. I think that's definitely the first Skylander who people would consider to be no skill. Now for my number 1 pick, it's going to be Wallup, for the reason that not only can you hold down his primary attack to do insane melee damage, but even his throwing hammer attacks, they also kind of have like auto aiming, so that kind of makes his entire moveset just 0 skill. And he's fun to use at first, but again you're just kind of holding down buttons or pressing buttons and the enemies are just getting destroyed without really you having to think too much. So that's why I think Wallup is the number 1 pick for the least skillful Skylander. So now we're moving on to the top 5 Skylanders who I think take the most skill to use. Now these are Skylanders where you have to put all 3 of their moves together and you really have to understand their playstyle, and once you do that you're gonna have a really good time with these Skylanders. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. My number 5 pick is gonna be Lobstar. Now Lobstar kind of feels like a spammy Skylander because you can spam his stars, but he's really not that good unless he's in his themed form. So it does take some skill to kind of manage how much steam you're using for your attacks, and also you have to distance yourself from enemies so you have enough time to get fully steamed. So that does take skill to manage that and use his gimmick of being fully steamed up and then doing as much damage as possible. And I also find myself using all of his attacks depending on the situation, so that's why I think that Lobstar is a pretty skillful Skylander. My number 4 pick is going to be Chill. Now all of Chill's attacks individually are not that good. Once you put them together by using her ice walls, like passing your javelins through your ice walls, by bouncing the ice walls into enemies, once you put all your attacks together you can actually make the most out of his character. So it does take skill to properly position the walls and use all her attacks together. Now my number 3 pick is Flameslinger. I really like Flameslinger's playstyle because he's a ranged Skylander with not too fast of a fire rate, but he has also really good mobility move which you can use to get away from enemies, and if you do a full circle it makes a big explosion, which is super helpful in big groups of enemies, because on his own with his like single shot arrows he can't deal with those. So if you combine the fire dashes to get away in the big explosions to deal with big enemies or big groups of enemies, and you just put all his moves together and just you're kind of being really strategic with it, then you can actually make this like a really strong Skylander. My number 2 pick is Popfizz. Popfizz has a moveset that is super complex, but at the same time is fun to play. So you actually have to use skill to combine all the effects of his potions. Like on his potion path, they do different effects on the ground, so you have to think quick to use the effects of different potions in order to deal with different types of enemies. And on the beast path, different types of potions will give you different beast attacks. So you always have to be quick thinking and just switching potions constantly and using all different types of attacks. So that's why I think Popfizz is a pretty skillful and fun to play Skylander. Now for my number 1 pick, it's going to be Dr. Neo Cortex. Now Dr. Neo Cortex is pretty weak when it comes to other senses, but if you really take the time to upgrade him and learn his moveset, you're going to find that he actually has a really complex moveset, and he really requires you to put all of his attacks together, because when you do this, it actually makes him pretty strong and pretty fun to use. So if you combine all his attacks, you can actually use them all at once, and just it's a pretty good combo. So you do have to be pretty skillful to use this Skylander. So that's all for this video, guys. I hope you did enjoy. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.